Hey, what is up guys? Back again with another video in the Spigot series. In this episode I'm going to show you how to do JSON file storage for your Minecraft plugins. Alright, so let's make the plugin here. So we already know a little bit about, storing things persistently. We can use persistent data containers, which is like a weird way of storing things in Minecraft entities. And we know how to do an H2 SQL database. I made a stream on that. I don't have like a specific video on it yet. I will do that eventually, but if you saw that stream, you should know how to do that at least a little bit. And what else do we know? We know how to do basic config.yml storage, some basic stuff like that. But besides that, we haven't really dived too deep into persistent storage. And the first thing I want to just introduce you to formally is JSON files, because I just love the JSON or JSON, however you want to say it, JSON. I just love the format. Hopefully you're familiar with the format. So it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. I recommend you look it up if you don't know what it is, but it's very popular for web development, and but it's also used in many other aspects. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to use that within your Spigot plugins here. So we're gonna call this the JSON file storage tutorial. Quite a name. And let's go ahead and create this. Okay, so what kind of plugin are we gonna use to demonstrate this concept? What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make a note making plugin so you can take notes and save them and load them, delete them, and all that stuff. So we're going to need a couple of packages here. So let's go ahead and do new package commands. Oops, I meant to say commands, not command. Okay, menu, utils, and then models. And I'll be using my SimpAPI that I just introduced in this plugin as well, so that you can get a solid example of how to use the SimpAPI in a real world plugin. So let's go ahead and create our note object model. So we're going to create a new class called note in our models package, and we're going to go ahead and give it some values here. So what do we want a note to have? Private string, we want it to have a player name, so whoever created the note. Private string message, the note message. Private date created, so that we know when the note was created. And then that's pretty simple. So now we're going to go ahead and do generate constructor, select all that, and then go ahead and generate the getters and setters for this. So code generate getter and setter, select all of these and click OK. So now we have a new notes class, and we can create notes whenever we want to store information. But we want to somehow change this notes into a JSON text and then store it in a file. How can we do that? We're actually going to use a library called Gson, which is, I believe, made by Google or something like that. Let me go ahead and pull it up. So Gson, yeah, it's actually by Google, it looks like. So it's called Gson, and it's a Java library that can be used to convert Java objects into their JSON representation. So you can convert a JSON string into a Java object, or you can convert a Java object into a JSON string. So it's both ways. And so it's just an easy way to model JSON into objects and objects into JSON. So it's really, really cool. It allows you to easily convert those things really easily. So anyway, so let's go ahead and add this to our project. If you don't know, this isn't really a tutorial on Gson, but hopefully with this tutorial you should get a better understanding of it if you're not familiar with it already. So let's go back here and put this as one of the dependencies. You can click this Maven reload button right here. I think that's all we need. There we go. So now we have Gson in our project, and we can use it wherever we want to. So how do we make it so that we can store a note in a JSON file? Let's go ahead and go to our utils package and do new Java class. And we're going to call this the note storage util. And this will be a class specifically for note operations, file operations. So you might be familiar with something called CRUD. CRUD is like a database term for storing stuff and working with data. It stands for create, read, update, and delete. So these are the most basic database operations that we're going to create here. So the first one that we're going to create is the create operation. So we'll do that by making a static method. So public static note, and that's going to be the note that we just created. So public static note, import note from our models package, create note. And then you're going to pass in a player P, and the string message of the note that you want to create. Okay, so now we can call this method wherever we want to because it's static and public. And then we can create a note. So we're going to do note is equal to new note. And then as the constructor is asking for, we want a player name and a message. So we can do p.getDisplayName, and then the message we just pass in. And then it also wants a date created. So we could just do new date like that if we want to, or we can go to note and just edit this. So we can get rid of this from the constructor parameter and just set it to do new date every time. So every time you create a new note, it's going to automatically set the date created field to the current date of when it's created. So whenever the constructor is run. So now we can get rid of this. There we go. So now we've created a new note. So we want to see how we can store that note into a JSON file. So we're going to have everything stored internally in the memory of our computer inside a array list of notes. Okay. So private static array list notes is equal to new array list. So this is how we manage the notes in our plugin here, but that obviously is not persistent, right? So we want to store this into a persistent database or a file or something like that, so it actually stays there no matter what. Like if the plugin turns off or reloads or anything like that, it'll always be here. So for now, we're just going to store our new notes within the notes array list, but just remember that it's not persistent. That's why I'm making this episode, to teach you how to do it persistently. So we're going to somehow save this into a JSON file. We got to figure that out. So what's the problem here? It says required type notes array list change field. Oh yeah, so not notes, but notes. There we go. So we just added the note that we created to the array list here, and then we're going to return notes since that's the return type. So we're just returning the note that we just created in case whoever called this needs the note that was just created for some reason to grab information or whatever they need it for. All right, so that's a simple create note method, part of the CRUD basic operations here. So now we have a simple way of creating notes. Okay, so now let's do the delete operation. So public static void delete note. So now we have to think about a way of providing, like, how do we tell it what note we want to delete? Do we just pass in the note itself, or do we want a way for it to locate the note from our collection here and then delete it? Or do we want to make it so that we can pass in a note ID, so we can do string ID or int ID, and this will be how we associate a note. So each note can have its own unique ID, and then if we want to identify a note, we can just pass the ID to a method, and that method will locate the note with that given ID, and then it'll delete it. So you can do either one. You can just pass in the note object itself if you found it, or you can just pass in the ID, and then it'll find the note with that ID and then delete it. In my opinion, it's better to just use an ID. That's what you often see in databases and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is make it so that we ask for an ID. But the problem is our notes model here does not have an ID. So what we can do is create one. And you have to decide for yourself, do you want it to be, what data type do you want it to be? You can do an integer, you can do a string. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to do a string. So private string ID. And the reason I'm using a string is because then we can do this.id when the constructor is called is equal to uuid.randomuuid, which is like a unique identifier, and .toString. So now we have created a unique uuid, and then we have stored it into the ID field of our notes here. So hopefully, if this works correctly, every single note that we create should have a unique uuid as a string. And of course, let's create a getter for that. So code generate getter. Okay. So now we can call get ID on that note to obtain it at any time we want to. Okie dokie. So now we'll go back here, open this up. So now we want to locate the notes that is associated with that ID that we just passed in. So we can just make a for loop. So we'll just loop through each note. So notes, like that. And then for each one, we want to see if notes.getID, the method that we just created, dot equals ignore case because it's a string, is equal to the ID that we just passed into the method above. So if it is, then we can do notes, which is our array list here, dot remove the note that we want to remove, and then we can break from this loop since we found the one that we're looking for. So this is a very basic linear search. So we're just going through each note one by one, looking for the note that we're trying to find, and then if we find it, we break out of the loop and we found it. There we go. So that's a simple way to delete notes. So now we have the create operation, the delete operation, and now let's do these other two operations here. So another very important one is finding a note from its ID. So public static, and this would be the read operation. So public static notes, find notes, string ID. So we're doing the exact same thing here actually. So we're just finding the note associated with that ID, except that this time we're not removing it, we're just going to return it. And we don't need the break anymore since the return statement will break out of the loop for us. Otherwise we return null if nothing was found. So again, just to recap, you pass in the ID of the node that you're looking for. It'll try and find the note with that ID if it exists. It'll return it if it exists with a simple linear search. If it can't find it, it'll come here and then it'll return null. So you need to check to see after you run this method here if it returns null or if it returns a note. Okay? So now we have the create operation, we have the read operation, and we have the delete operation. Let's do the final operation now, which is the update operation. So public static note update note string ID note new note. So we're going to pass in, so essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to give it the ID of the note that we want to update, and we're going to find that note, and then we're going to also pass in a new note object, which is what we're going to do is take that data from this new object and then put it in the original object and then update it into our array list here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So first let's loop through it again. So notes if notes.getID equals ignore case ID, then we will do note.setPlayerName new notes.getPlayerName, and then note.setMessage new note.getMessage. So those are the only two things that we need to set because the date will be the same. That's when the note was created originally. But these are the two ones that we want to update. So we're taking that from the new note provided and then putting it into the original note object. And then that's all you need to do. So after that, we'll just go ahead and we can break out of the loop so we don't let it loop anymore. There's no point in doing that. And then return null. Null if it's not found, of course. But otherwise, we will return, actually instead of breaking, let's return the new notes that was just updated. There we go. So just to recap here, we're providing the note that was found, we're providing the ID of the note that we want to update, and then the data of a new note that we want to transfer the data from. So we're finding that old note from the ID, and then we're taking the data from the new note and giving it, and then putting it into the old note, and then we're returning that new note after we updated it. And then otherwise, if it's not found, then we return null. Okay, pretty simple stuff. And so now we have all three CRUD operations. We have create, read, update, delete. So this is a very basic setup for working with data. So this is not going to make it persistent itself. Of course, like I said, array lists are just part of your memory. They're not persistent. They're not stored after the program is done running persistently. So we need a way to store these persistently. So it's good to have these operations already set up before you do the persistent part, because this is a basic these basic operations are going to be the same for anything that you want to use it for, not just notes, but any type of data that you want to store within a file or a database or anything like that. So obviously it's going to vary a little bit, because sometimes you might not want to store like a single object, you might want to store like a list or something like that, but the general idea is the same. You want to have these basic operations so that you can work with the data and then use it however you wish, and then you can update the data in the persistent data store. So let's do that part now. So how do we make it so that we can take this array list here and then store it in a JSON file? So let's make a new method here. So public static void save notes. Okay, so we're going to use the Gson library, like I said, so is equal to new Gson. There we go. So bringing that in will allow us to use Gson. So first things first, we want to get a file object of where we want to store this JSON file that we're working with here. So we can do file, which is not a part of JSON, by the way. It's a part of just the Java language, just a file object, is equal to new file. And into that, we're going to pass in the path of where we want to store this. So we want to get the data folder, the path of the data folder for this plugin. So what I mean by that is if we go to my plugins folder here for my server, each plugin that we have has a data folder. So we want to grab this data folder, the path for this data folder like here, and then put it into here like that. But if we do it like that, I mean, we can do it like that, but we want it to be dynamic because not every computer has the same path, right? Obviously. So we want it to be grabbed dynamically, so it'll just grab the right path every time for what we need. Okay. So to do that, we need an instance of our plugin, of our plugin. So we can go here and do private static JSON file storage tutorial plugin, and then inside here in our on enable we can do plugin is equal to this, because this class does represent our plugin. And then now we can create a getter for that. So code generate getter, boom. All right, so now we can go back into where we were and then access the instance of this plugin. So JSON file storage tutorial.get plugin.get data folder, as you can see here, which returns a file object. And then we want to get the absolute path of that. So we want to grab the path, because if you do control P here, this new file constructor is asking for a string path name. So we want to get that path and then also provide and part of that path is going to be the name of the file itself, right? Because this is a file object. So the path doesn't just mean the folder that the file is going to be in. We want the actual folder, the file name itself. So we can do /notes.json. So that will be the name of the file that we're storing the notes in, notes.json, which will exist in whatever path this gives us, okay? And we'll see that in a second. So now that we have this file object, we can then store stuff in it. But actually, no, before we do that, we want to make sure that so sometimes if you don't have a config.yml, this will not be generated for you. So you want to make sure that this folder is created before you do any saving of the notes.json, because if it's not there, then you can't save it, right? So to do that, we can do file. file.getParentFile.make directory. So this will ensure that the directories that the nodes.json file lives in will be created before we create the JSON file. And now to create the JSON file, we can do create new file. There we go. So finally, the part where we actually put the data into the file, we can do a new writer here. Writer is equal to new file writer. And this is a simple way to write file data. So let's import writer, import class, and let's see what the parameters are. So it's asking for a bunch of things. We can just provide a file name, a file. So we already have a file object, so we're going to provide a file. And then of course the second parameter here is asking for this one, is asking if you want to append it or not. So this is basically if you want to override the file. So if you append it, if you do true to append it, it's going to put the data on the end of the file. But if you do false, which is I believe the default functionality, it's just going to overwrite the entire file. So no matter how many times you save it, it's just going to overwrite the previous data. So in this case, we want to do false because we want to overwrite the data with the current and latest array list that we have here. Okay, so how can we take this array list and then map it into JSON text? Now this is the part where we use the Gson library. So we can do gson.toJSON, and you have all these different overloaded methods here. And we just want to provide our notes array list and then the writer that we want to write it to. And this will do all the work for us. So it already knows, because it's smart, how to convert our notes array list into JSON text. So we just provide it and give it the writer that we're using, and then it'll do the rest for you. So just make sure that you also do writer.flush to actually write the data, and then writer.close to close it. And then after that, we'll just have a message saying notes saved, just for like debugging purposes. And then finally, we need to, since we're doing file operations here, IO operations, we need to make sure we handle the IO exception here. So throws IO exception. Okay, so this may be a little overwhelming if you've not worked with Gson before, or IO, but it's a pretty simple process. Again, you're just grabbing the Gson library, obtaining the file of what you want to, work with, creating the parent directories for that file, creating the file itself if it does not exist, getting the writer so that we can write the data to the file, and then converting our array list or data into a JSON text. And then we're saving that text into the file by flushing it and closing it, and note saved. There we go. So now we need to make sure that this save notes method is called anytime that we update the data. I mean, realistically, you probably don't want to call it every single time. You want to have maybe a thread or something that just updates it every once in a while. But in this case, we have a very, very simple plugin. So we're just going to call it every time we update the data. Realistically, if you have a big giant plugin where the CRUD operations are being called a lot, like maybe every second, multiple times a second, all the time, you probably don't want to be doing these file operations every single time because that can be expensive to the performance of the server and all that stuff. So you don't want to really do that probably. You probably want to have a thread, like I said, that just runs every minute or 5 minutes that saves the data. So if the server turns off, you'll have at least like the latest 5 minutes. You'll be like 5 minutes behind, but that's okay, right? It's only 5 minutes. So that's just an example of how you might want to do that. But like I said, we have a very simple plugin here, so we're just going to call it every time we update the data. So after we delete it, we want to call update notes, or what is it? Save notes. Save notes. And then we'll just surround this with try and catch. There we go. What else? So we don't need it for find notes because we're just finding a note. We do need it for create note. So after we create a new note, we're going to call this here. There we go. So after we create a note, after we delete a note, and then after we update the notes. That's a good one too. So we'll do that before we return here. All right, good. So that'll save the notes array list every time we update it to the file, the JSON file, so that it's persistent. So the one final thing we need to do is just to complete this file here is make a load notes method here, so we can grab the notes from the file every time we reload the server or we start the plugin up. We want to grab the notes from the file and then put it into our array list here so that we have the data that we stored persistently, right? Because there's no point in saving it to the JSON file if you're not going to grab it from the JSON file, right? Because again, just to reiterate, you should know this already, but if the plugin turns off or the server turns off, this will be wiped completely because this is not persistent. It's only stored in your computer's memory. And when the program is not running, the memory is deallocated or unused, okay? All right, so that was a lot, maybe a little overwhelming, but we have a bunch of CRUD operations now, so we can use that anywhere in our plugin. We have the save notes method that'll be called whenever we update the notes in any way. And now let's test it out to actually see if it works. Okay, so now let's use our command manager part of the SimpAPI to create a simple command so that we can create notes. So new Java class, we'll call it the create notes command. And this will extend subcommand. If you haven't seen my SimpAPI command manager video, then make sure to watch that before you do this. Oh yeah, we haven't imported SimpAPI, so let me do that. Let me show you how to do that. So we'll go to SimpAPI and GitHub, go here, just copy the repository, go to your pom.xml and go back to repositories, put it here, and then go back to here, here, and go to the dependency, copy that, and then put it down here in dependencies under your Gson library import. And also just change this to 1.6. That's the latest version of it. So that'll grab it for you. There we go. Obviously, by the time you're watching this, there might be an updated version of SimpAPI. Always use the one that's on GitHub. That'll be the latest one. It's not updated right now because I haven't officially released it at the time of this recording. So that's the only reason it's not updated. But for future reference, make sure to grab that from there directly and don't change it. Okay, so now we can go back here and use import subcommand. So import class subcommand, and then we can implement all these methods that come with it. So return, we'll call it create. So it's going to be /note create or /notes create. That probably sounds better. So we're going to call it create a new note. So the syntax will be /notes create. Message goes here. We'll say message. All right. And then we don't need this, but for here we're going to put what happens when they run the command. So we don't need to check to see if they're a player because we already have done that behind the scenes. But we want to see if args.length is greater than 0. That means that they provided the arguments for the message that we want to grab. So now we'll use a string builder to grab that message from the parameter. So string builder is equal to new string builder. Okay. So for int I is equal to 0, I is less than args.length minus 1. So the reason we're using minus 1 for here is because we're going to ignore the last one because we don't want to put a space. You'll see, we don't want to put a space on the last one, so we're just going to do that one manually. So string builder.append args I. So this will grab the argument, looping through each one by one, and then append, add a space. So this will put a space between each of the words. And then after that, like I said, we're not going to do the last one because it would put a space after the last one, which we don't want. So we're just going to do string builder.append args.length -1. So it's going to grab the last one for us. And there we go. So that should give us a string builder containing the message that was provided in the command after we run it. So now we can do note storage utility or util.create note, and we can give it the player and the message. So the player is the person who's running the command, and the message is string builder.toString. There we go. So now we've created a new note, and after we do that, we could manually save it by calling the note storage util.save notes, or we can let it do it itself because we already added it to this method here. So you could take it out and then call it yourself whenever you run this, or not. So you could do it however you want to. Okay. All right. So now we have the command. So let's go back to our main plugin class here and go ahead and set up the command manager. So we'll do command manager. Okay, that was weird. There we go. Command manager dot create core command. So it's asking for, if we do control P, it's asking for an instance of the plugin. So this, it's asking for a name for the core command. So notes. It's asking for a command description. So create and list notes. It's asking for a string of the command usage. So /notes. It's asking for a command list. So the command list is a simple functional interface that allows you to specify how you want the commands to be listed when you do /notes or /notes help. So command list, and we can just do something like this. So we can do for int I is equal to 0, I is less than subcommand, or we can just do subcommand list, and then we can do each one by one. So let's see, I'll just copy it for where I have it here. Let's see. There we go. So it'll just have a border, it'll have a bottom border, and then in between that it'll just list each command one by one, providing the syntax and also the description of the command. And you'll see how that looks in a second. Let's change this to P. There we go. And of course, in a realistic scenario, you would want to add color to this to make it look nicer. But there you go. So after that, we want some more parameters. So control P is asking for a list of aliases. We don't have any aliases, so we're just going to leave that how it is. And we're going to use this bottom one here. It's asking for a list of all the subcommands as a variable arguments parameter. So we're going to do create note command.class. That's all you got to do to provide the subcommand that you just created inside your note core command. So now we can surround that with a try and catch. Simplify this. And there we go. It looks a little, intimidating, but it's really much easier than we had it before. So once you do, this is literally the only hard part. You just got to do this, and then everything is pretty much set up. So that's all you need to do. Okay. So now we can, and this will register your commands for you, by the way. You should know this if you watched the command manager video, but it'll register everything for you, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. So we can go ahead and run this already to test out the note storage and see if it stores everything successfully. Okay, so we're gonna go to open in Explorer, go to Target, grab the jar file that we just compiled, go back to our plugins folder, and start the server. And now let's see if the command that we just created works. All right, so if we do /pl, we see that the plugin is right there. So JSON file storage tutorial. So we'll do /notes because that's our core command. And as you can see, it has the top border, the subcommand, and the /notes create message dash, and then well, let me try again. The description that we provided, and then the bottom border. So like I said, you might want to make it look nicer if you're gonna actually have this in a real plugin. But yeah. Anyway, so now let's try that out. So we'll do /notes create I like this plugin. And if you look in our console, it says notes saved. So let's see if that actually saved or not. So we'll go to test server, plugins. We can see that the folder was generated. That's good. And as you can see, we have notes.json within that folder. So if we open this up using Notepad++ or any text editor, you can see we have our note here. Isn't that awesome? So we have note ID, which is a unique identifier. We have the player name, which has the color codes on it, but you know, whatever. And then we have the message itself for the note, and then the date created. So June 1st, 2021, 3:29:43 p.m. Awesome. And it's surrounded by a JSON array and a JSON object opening and closing tag, and then a closing array tag. But as you can see, there's one little issue. It says create I like this plugin. So there's something messed up with the message grabbing thing that we just created. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. So if we go back, all we need to do is just change this to 1. So just go 1 parameter higher, because of course the 0 parameter is just going to be the subcommand itself. So that's why we had that mistake there. So if we rerun this and then look at it, it won't be like that anymore. So there we go. We successfully saved an array list for Java into a JSON text. So that's how you can do some basic file saving using JSON, the Gson library into JSON text. So now we're going to test everything out. We're going to make a simple menu interface where we can, list all the notes. We can delete notes. We can create notes and all that stuff. So let's do that now. So first we're going to start with a new Java class, note menu, and that's going to extend menu from the SimpAPI. So there we go. And then do Alt Enter or hover over that and do implement methods. So that's going to return note to menu, because that's the menu name. And then of course do the constructor. So for the slots we'll do 36. That should be enough. And we're going to cancel all clicks true, because we don't want them to be able to move anything. And for the handle method, we'll just leave it how it is for now. We're going to do that in a second because we don't have anything else right now. And for this bottom part, I'm just going to copy this from my setup here and paste it so we can save time. So basically what I've done here is just created 4 buttons. Each of these buttons take you to a different thing. So the first button here, the create button, is going to just tell you to use the create command. So once we set it up, it'll do that. And then we have the list button here, so it'll just list all of the notes. And then we have the delete button, so it'll just it'll let you choose a note and then you can delete it. And then we have the close button to get out of the menu. So there we go. And then we're just filling it in with filler glass so it looks better and setting the slots for the items. So pretty simple stuff. Okay, so now let's start off with the easy one. We'll just make the list menu. So we'll go to menus, do new Java class, list notes menu, extends menu. There we go. Alright, so that's going to return list of notes. Make sure to do the constructor here. Alright, so for the slots, we will do 54, the maximum. And then for cancel all clicks, we'll set that to true. And then for the set menu items, all we want to do is loop through all of the notes after grabbing them. But let's close everything else. And let's go back to our note storage util. As you can see, we don't have a method for grabbing all of the notes, so we should create one. So let's go ahead and public static list of notes. Notes. There we go. Find all notes. And so we don't need to pass anything there. So we'll just return the notes. So notes, just like that. And that will find all the notes for us. So now let's go through all of the notes and list them one by one in this inventory. So list of notes, find all, we'll just call it notes is equal to note storage util dot find all notes, and that will return what we need. Import note, if it lets us. There we go. So now we want to loop through each note, so just do this. So for we'll do notes. And for each of the notes, we want to create an item. So we will do item stack item is equal to make item material dot paper. And so we will provide the note name, which is just going to be the ID. So note number plus note dot get ID. There we go. Import item stack, and then for the lore, that's going to be this one here. For the make item utility method, we have a lore option, so you can add as many lines as you want. So that will just simply be the message itself. So note.getMessage. So that will be the lore. And you know what? Let's add another lore. Let's say created by note.get player name. There we go. So that should create an item for each note that says the ID of the note, the creator, and the message itself. And we want to add that to our inventory. So inventory.add item. And then we want to have a close button so we can go back if we want to. So inventory.set item 49, and we need a close item. We got to make one. So item stack close is equal to make item material dot barrier close. And we're just going to throw that right here. There we go. Okay, so now let's handle this when they're clicked on and everything like that. So the only thing we need to handle really is just the close click, because if you click on these, nothing's going to happen. But if you click on the close button, then we want it to actually go back. So if e.getCurrentItem.getType is equal to material.barrier, then we want to go back to the previous menu. So to do that, we can do the, well, we could close it or we can go back. That's the, I guess since it's called close, well, we can do the thing. You can do either thing. It's up to you. But I think I'll just go back. So what's it called? Menu manager dot open menu notes menu dot class, and then the player that you're closing it for, or the PMU. So there we go. Let's see, get type. Yeah, looks good to me. So now we should be able to see all the notes listed, and also you can go back to the previous menu. Great. So now let's make it so that when you click on the list item here, it takes you to that menu. So we'll use a switch statement this time. So e.getCurrentItem.getType case material paper. Okay, I think we can just do this paper. Okay, so case paper, and we will say if they click on paper, then we want to do menu manager dot open menu list notes menu dot class, and then the PMU. There we go. And we will break. So can't forget to break. Alright, what's the problem? It says switch statement has too few. That's fine. Okay, cool. So that should handle that. So let's now try this out and see what we get. Alright, so now let's do /notes. Oh wait, we didn't even create a menu command, did we? So let's go back and do that. So commands, new menu, notes menu command. So extends subcommand. Return menu. Open up the note menu. /notes menu. So when they click that, all we got to do is make it open for them. So menu manager dot open menu. And what do we need? So we need the note menu dot class and also the PMU. So how do we get a PMU for a player? Oh yeah, we don't need a PMU, so we can provide the player, so we can just put player just like that. There we go. And let's handle the exception. Awesome, great. So now it should add that, but we cannot forget to register the subcommand. So let's go back to our main here and add that on the end here. So we'll call it the notes menu command dot class. There we go. So now everything should be registered, and we should I'll see you in a second. So if we do /notes, it'll say both the new command and the old command. So it'll say notes create message, create a new note, and then /notes menu, open up the note menu. Good. So now we'll do /notes menu, and nothing happened. We got an exception. It says me.CRUD SimpAPI exceptions menu manager not setup exception. Ah, yes, we forgot to set up. We keep forgetting everything, so we need to set up the menu manager. So menu manager dot setup. And first it wants a server, so we'll do get server. Then it wants a plugin, so this, and then it wants our customized player menu utility, so player menu utility dot class. And that's all we have to do. Alright, so we'll do /notes, and as you can see, it has the old command and the new command. So we'll do /notes menu, and we have all the options here. So list notes, create note, delete note, close. In a realistic scenario, you might want to actually make these look nice, but I'm just trying to show you the basics of how to do something. So if we click list notes, it does not have any notes here because it's not we didn't like load the file after we restarted the plugin, right? We only saved the notes to the file, the JSON file, but after the plugin restarted, we didn't load them up, so it doesn't have the data still there. So it's not fully persistent yet until we add that. But for now, let's go ahead and do notes create. Here's a new note, and we'll add a second one. So now we'll do slash notes menu, and we can view them here. So notes, and then there's the ID. Here's a new note created by Cody Simpson 999. Here's a new note 2 created by Cody Simpson 999, and they both have unique IDs. Great. So as you can see, that's how that works. All right, so now let's finally make it so that we can load the notes from the file so that we can have it fully persistent. So when the plugin starts up, it grabs the notes from the file, and we can have them stored into the array list. So let's go back to note storage util, and we'll under this save notes method, we will add a new method called load notes. So public static void load notes throws IO exception. And this one will be very similar. So Gson is equal to new Gson, and we'll just copy this. So first we want to see if the file actually exists, because this may be the first time the plugin is loading up, so the file might not exist. So if it does exist, we want to read it. So reader is equal to new file reader. Just like before, we used a print writer, or no, a file writer. Now we're going to use a file reader. Okay, so we're going to pass in the file, and we're going to do, and we're going to now what we need to do is read the notes from the file using Gson. So due to the way that Gson works, we have to store it as a array before. So a notes array, we'll call it n is equal to new, or we'll do Gson dot from JSON, and we pass in the reader, and then we pass in the type of the thing that we're trying to grab. So it's able to model the JSON text into a Java data type. So in this case, we want to model it into a notes array. So notes class. So notes is equal to new array list, and then we're just going to pass in arrays.asList and then in. So that's just going to convert our array of notes here into a list, and then we're going to convert that list into an array list. So very simple. And so now that's all we need to do. So now we can just print out notes loaded. So we can call this now when the plugin starts up, so we'll grab all the data from the file. So let's go back to our main here, and on the inside the on enable, we can just put it here. So we'll do load. So we'll do notes storage util dot load notes, and that will grab all the notes and then load them into our array list. Cool. So that will make us fully persistent. So now everything will be saved, and then you can grab it from now on. Okay, so let's check that out. Okay, so we're going to turn the server off, and hopefully everything that we just saved is still there when we load it back up, because we have the load method now. So go back here, plugins, paste that, and then run it, and see what we get. Okay, go into the server, slash notes menu, click a list, and here we have the notes that we just had. So even though the server stopped, it saved it to the file. So when we start the server back up, it grabs it from the file, and then everything is just like it was before. So nothing was lost. And that's the idea behind persistent data. It's persistent. It persists. It's very simple. So hopefully you find that really, really cool. In terms of like how to save stuff and load stuff from a file, that's pretty much it. Although I'm not done with this plugin, I'll finish that in a second. But I just want y'all to see that's how you store stuff persistently in a JSON file. Of course, there's, like I said, variation if there's different types of data that you're storing. If it's a list, then that's just the same way. But if it's something like a single object or some other data structure, then it may get a little more complicated. But if you just read the Gson documentation, I'm sure you can figure it out. It's not too hard. So hopefully you're finding this very interesting so far. I have not really shown how to do stuff like this before. So if you like that, hit the like button and I'll show more, okay? Anyway, let's get back to business here. So let's go ahead and work on the delete note menu. So menus, new, Java class, delete note menu. So this will basically just display a list of notes again, except that you can click on one that you want to delete this time, and then it'll open up a confirm delete menu. As for why I talk in like 200 times speed, I have no idea. So get menu name, delete, choose a note to delete. How about that? So 54, true. And we'll just copy the code from the other class. So close other tabs, list notes menu. Here we go. What the heck did I just do? All right, cool. So now this time, instead of clicking on, well, first we need this, but also we're gonna add another one for if they click on something. So if e.getCurrentItem.getType is equal to material.paper, then they clicked on a node that they want to delete. So we'll open up the confirm delete menu, which we don't have. So we'll do new confirm delete menu, extends menu, turn confirm delete notes. By the way, you can do without hovering over the red thing. If you want to just see what it says, you can do Alt Enter, and then it'll give you the options here, and just press Enter. That's another trick you can do. All right, so the slots, so we'll just have 9. It'll just be very simple, just a yes or no button. True. I'm just going to copy this from my example project that I coded before. So we'll just have a yes button, and we'll have a no button, and we'll add it to the middle of the inventory, and then have filler glass around it. And so now let's handle it when we click on it. So whenever we click, we'll do the simple part first. If they click the red banner, then we want to go back. So I'll have a switch statement. So e.getCurrentItem.getType case red banner. So if they click the red banner, we'll go back. So menu manager dot open menu delete notes menu dot class PMU. Yeah. So break that and wait. Okay, yeah. Okay, so that's what we got there. So now we need to figure out how to delete it. But let's go back to our delete note menu. When they click the paper, we want to somehow transfer that note's ID into the confirm delete menu. So if they click yes on the confirm delete menu, it deletes that note, given that ID. So how do we transfer the ID when they click on the paper to this confirm delete menu? In that case, we can use the player menu utility. That's what it's there for. So we'll have what we want to store. So private string notes to delete, and so that'll be, well, we can say no. Yeah, that's fine. So note to delete, which will just store the ID of the thing that we're trying to delete. So code generate getter and setter, boom. So now we have to figure out how do we store the ID in the item. For that, we can do a few techniques. We can store it in the display name of the item or the metadata of the item, or we can go deeper into the metadata and store it inside the persistent data container of the item. That's the best way to do it. It's the most clean way to do it. So inside of here, where we set all this information, we can also grab the item meta. So item meta is equal to item.get item meta. Make sure to import item meta. And then we can grab the container. So container, well, we can do item meta dot get persistent data container dot set new namespace key, and then instance of the plugin. So we'll do JSON file storage tutorial dot get plugin, and then the name of the key for what we're storing. So we'll call it the notes ID, and then we want the data type of that. So persistent data type string is what we're storing, and then the actual string of the notes is going to be notes dot get ID. So that will be stored in the metadata of the item. Don't forget to do item item.setItemMeta, and that will set it. So now we can go back up here. So when they click on the item, now we can grab it from the persistent data container. So we can do persistent data container is equal to e.getCurrentItem.get persistent data container, and then we will grab the note, the string note ID from that. So is equal to container dot get new namespace key, JSON file storage tutorial dot get plugin, note ID was the key that we provided, and then persistent data type string. Okay, so that will grab the note ID that we saved within the item and then store it in the string here. So now we can delete it, now we can pass it to our confirm delete menu by storing it within the persistent data container. The player menu utility, sorry. So to do that, we have to convert our PMU, the abstract player menu utility, into our custom player menu utility. So since the custom player menu utility extends abstract player menu utility, we can cast it. So player menu utility is equal to PMU which is obtained from the superclass menu. We can just cast it just like that. So now we can do player menu utility dot set note to delete note ID, and then now we can finally open it. So menu manager dot open menu confirm delete menu dot class, and then we want to provide the player menu utility, so it passes the data. Okay, so that's a lot, maybe a little overwhelming, but just to recap, we are grabbing all of the notes that are in our plugin currently, and then listing each one in the menu. But also, while we're doing that, we're setting inside the persistent data container of that note the actual ID of the note, so that when we click on the note above, in the menu, it'll grab the persistent data container of that note, grab the ID from it, and then set that into the player menu utility, and then pass that player menu utility into the confirm delete menu, so that the player can choose whether they want to delete that note or not. So if you're not familiar with this, then make sure to watch my menu manager module of SimpAPI video. That will give you all the information you need to know how to do this properly. So now let's go back to confirm delete menu. And so if they click the green banner, then we can do menu manager. Then we can do, first of all, cast it again. So player menu utility. So we have to cast it because the abstract player menu utility doesn't have our custom values, right? So that's why we have to cast it into our custom one. There we go. So now we can do string note ID player menu utility.get note to delete. So note to note is equal to note storage util dot find note, and then pass in note ID and make sure to import notes. Now we can do if notes is not equal to null. That means that it's still there and we can delete it. So we can do note storage util dot delete note, and we can actually delete it by its ID, so we don't even need to do this part. So we'll just get rid of this and just do delete notes and pass in the ID, so that will delete it for us, and then we can break. After we delete it, let's just let the player know that the note was actually deleted. So we'll do pmu.getOwner.sendMessage. We'll do it in green, check color.green. The note has been deleted. Import check color. Oh, if it lets us. There we go. And then pmu.getOwner.close inventory. So after they delete it, it'll send them a message telling them it has been deleted, and also it'll close the inventory for them. And there we go. So I think that's all we need. I think that's all we need. Okie dokie, so let's test this out and see what happens. So let's run this, and I'll see you in the server. Alright, I'm joining the server, and now we can do /notes menu, and we have our list notes here still. Good, we can go back. We have create note, that doesn't do anything yet, and then we have delete note, that doesn't do anything, so we forgot something. Let's go back to here. So that'll be a note menu. Okay, yeah, I forgot to set it so that when you click the delete and close, and create, it actually does something. So case, let's do close first. That's the easiest one. So that's a barrier. There we go. And to close it, we'll do pmu.getOwner.closeInventory, and then break. And then let's do for the delete one, so lava bucket. So if they click on the lava bucket, we want to open up the delete note menu. So menu manager, delete open menu, delete note menu.class, and then the PMU or the player, either one. Break. And then finally the create, whenever you click the create button, so that'll be a writable book. So if they click the create button, we'll just tell them to use the create note command. So to do that, we'll do pmu.getOwner.sendMessage, color translator, translate color codes, create a note like this, and d /notes create I like notes, and then we'll close the inventory for them so they can do that. So pmu.getInventory or getOwner.closeInventory. All right, and then finally break. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. We're just handling the click of any of the items of this inventory so that we can have it do stuff when they click on it. So that should be all we need actually. So let's run this now and see what happens. /notes menu. We'll do create note. It says create a note like this. /notes create I like notes. Great, that works. List note still works. Go back. Delete note works now. So let's delete the second note. We'll go back. Good, that works. Delete. And it says the note has been deleted. Okay, let's find out if that's true. Delete note, and it's gone. Awesome, great. So that works exactly how we want it to. It lists all the notes. We click the note, and then that data transfers, the node ID transfers, and then when we click on it, it deletes the note from our array list, and then that array list is saved to the file. So if we look at the file now, we can see that that has been updated with the only one note now. Oh shit, I just opened it with Visual Studio. Let's look here. So there we go. There's only one note now instead of two. Perfect. Alright, so that's all I want to show you. I think that was a pretty long episode. Now you know how to store data within a JSON file for your MC plugins, and using the Gson library, and also using the SimpAPI to manage the menu in the command manager and all that. So hopefully you found this very informative. If you want to see more videos like this where I show you how to do like databases and files and stuff like this and advanced topics, let me know. Just leave a comment below of what you want to see and I might do it. But hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, make sure to hit that like button. I'll leave the code for this episode in the description below, like I always do, so you can check it out and bookmark it and all that stuff, so you can come back to it later on if you want to see it yourself and all that stuff. So it'll be there for you guys. And also we have a link for the Discord server in our description below, so you can join our Discord server and get some friends, get some help on your projects, anything like that. Just get involved in the community and you can find a lot of new friends and get help and stuff. I just said that twice, but you get the point. The last thing I want to tell you is that if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, and you can cancel at any time. It's a quick and simple way to support the channel, but you also get some cool perks like early access to all of my new videos, including this one. You get a cool rank on my Discord server, so you can show everyone how swaggy you are, and also you get to see yourself on the screen like you see right now. So if that sounds cool to you, think about joining. If not, thanks for watching anyway. Alright, so that's it guys. If you like the video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and peace.